Eleanor Hawthorne stood beneath a black parasol as the priest recited solemn verses over her husband's grave. The cemetery, with its Gothic headstones and iron gates, was nestled in the fog-drenched countryside of Kent. The year was 1852, and mourning in Victorian England was an art of its own: black veils, crepe dresses, and silent grief. But Eleanor's heart did not break. Thomas Hawthorne had been a cruel man behind the velvet curtains of their stately home. Society had seen only the gentleman, heir to Hawthorne Hall, refined and charming. Behind closed doors, he'd been her tormentor. His death from a hunting accident no one seemed eager to question left her more relieved than bereaved. When the solicitor arrived in a dark wool suit and gloves, he delivered the news with clinical detachment. Everything, Hawthorne Hall, the estates and financial holdings, passes now to Lord James Hawthorne. She stared at the will in disbelief. Not even a stipend for her personal use. You are, however, entitled to residence in the east wing of the manor under his lordship's hospitality. A widow without an income was a ghost in Victorian society. Eleanor packed her black satin gowns, silver hairbrush, and journals into a single trunk and boarded the carriage for Hawthorne Hall. The manor loomed like a castle from a Bronte novel. Gothic turrets scraped the foggy skies, and ivy clawed up its grey stone facade. Gas lamps flickered weakly in the cold halls, casting dancing shadows along the panelled walls. Servants, all dressed in muted uniforms, bowed silently when she entered. James Hawthorne met her in the drawing-room. At 35, he carried himself with the cool confidence of landed gentry. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored frock coat, a starched cravat fastened with a blood-red ruby pin. His dark hair was neatly parted, and his expression was unreadable. "You'll find this house austere," he said, offering no condolences. "I trust you understand discretion is paramount. The family name must be preserved." Eleanor nodded, lowering her gaze in accordance with propriety, but her spirit flared. She'd spent 3 years cowering. She would not do so again. The gardens had once been the pride of Lady Hawthorne, James's late mother. Now they were in disrepair, like much of the household's emotional landscape. Eleanor began restoring the greenhouse and rose beds, finding solace among blooms forbidden in her years of marriage. James often watched her from the library window, sipping Darjeeling from fine china, puzzled by the quiet widow who had once belonged to his despised brother. He began to join her during morning walks, always at a proper distance. They spoke of Byron, of parliamentary reform, of the Queen's latest appearance in Windsor. But the silences between them became as weighted as any conversation. "I've noticed," he said once, "you no longer flinch when I speak." She looked up, the brim of her mourning bonnet catching the sunlight. "I've begun to remember what a man's voice sounds like when it's not laced with threat." Arabella Crane, heiress to a Midlands textile empire, was a constant fixture at the manor. She arrived in a barouche with satin gloves and lace parasols, her laughter echoing through the marble halls. She was exactly what society expected as James's future wife: beautiful, wealthy, and socially formidable. She dismissed Eleanor as the broken little widow, often offering backhanded compliments in front of other guests. Arabella embodied Victorian womanhood, decorative, sharp-tongued, and obsessed with reputation. But it was Eleanor with whom James chose to stroll through the orchard. It was Eleanor who offered him silence without judgment, and quiet intelligence instead of flirtation. In a dusty cabinet in the master study, Eleanor discovered Thomas's private journal. It was locked, but James broke it open with an antique letter opener. What they found within changed everything. "I didn't expect you to read it," she said. "I had to know," James replied. "He wrote of punishing you for disobedience, as if you were livestock, not a wife." His hands trembled as he closed the book. "Eleanor," he said, using her name without title for the first time, "what he did was monstrous, and I, through ignorance, allowed it." In that moment, the rigidity of class and propriety seemed to melt. He reached out, not as a lord, but as a man. "I want to protect you," he said, voice raw. "You already are," she whispered. At the annual St. Jude's Winter Ball, Arabella confronted James in front of a gathering of titled guests and clergy. "You would disgrace the Hawthorne name for a disgraced widow?" she spat, her voice venomous. James's reply was cold, decisive. "I would honor her above any woman in this room." The scandal rippled through society pages for weeks. But Eleanor, wrapped in a simple velvet gown with a garnet brooch, stood taller than ever. One morning in May, James invited her to walk in the conservatory. The sunlight poured through the glass, warming the tropical blooms. "I've spoken to your solicitor," he said, adjusting his gloves nervously. "You are no longer bound to the East Wing. I wish to make you mistress of the house." She blinked, unsure. "As your wife?" She smiled. "Will I still have access to the rose garden?" He laughed, a sound she had never heard from him before. "You may rule it." In June of 1853, Eleanor Hawthorne married James, Lord Hawthorne, in a quiet ceremony at the family chapel. She no longer wore mourning black, but a gown of soft lilac, a symbol of second chances in Victorian tradition. Society, ever fickle, came to admire the new Lady Hawthorne, elegant, thoughtful, and firm in her values. The manor became known not for its coldness, but for its roses, its music, and the laughter of two people who had found light after darkness.